What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. It's Jake here. We're here at Imiloa, and in today's show, I talked to Ian Hart. Ian is the best-selling author of Healing Hacks. He spent the last 10 years of his life healing his autoimmune disease naturally. He's a Wim Hof instructor, and actually Wim Hof wrote the foreword to his book. He's also the creator of Earth Fit for Life, and I really enjoyed our conversation. It was informative and educational. Ian, because of his own personal discovery with his health challenges, applies that to current day situations of what's happening in the world. And we go into that and get some alternative perspectives. It's really inspiring, really interesting. I hope you like it. As always, you can get more podcasts on Facebook and more vlog on Instagram at Imiloa Institute. Also check out IGTV. And Ian has a masterclass as well that you can check out on the platform. Thanks again for listening or for watching, and enjoy my conversation with Ian Hart. So we were just talking, Ian Hart, before we started about the source of knowledge and how so many people are like asking. It's just such a weird time to be alive. Like, people will ask for the science to prove certain things that you say, and then they don't actually want to do the work that they're asking you to do. It's this weird time that we're living in, I feel.
Yeah, and the other thing that's weird about science is that, you know, an editor of one of the most prestigious medical journals came out and said that he doesn't trust any of the science anymore in the medical journal. And this is a prestigious medical journal because it's so manipulated by money and politics and all these different things. And you can literally manipulate the numbers, right? There's a book that Bill Gates was saying, like one of the top books he was recommending, which was How to Lie with Statistics. And you can manipulate the numbers to make it look like this is the way we want things. And so with all the information out there, you can like just look at one thing and say, oh, here's this information or here's that information that proves my point. And so that's part of the issue I think that people have nowadays.
Yeah, it's a weird, when all of this started, I guess I became present to it in like January, February of this year. Like, started in China, and then we started to see cases in the U.S. And I'll put everything in quotes because I know I'm going there because I'm just so curious because you're like a tuned-in dude who's been doing this research for 10 years, almost 15 years, right?
Yeah, over 10 years.
10 years. And I'm just curious, like, how it struck you at the beginning. Because honestly, I picked up my phone the other day and I'm like, it's almost August. Like, I feel like I've been in a weird sort of loop, even though I'm like advancing my own life since like March. How did this strike you when it all first started? I'm curious the Ian Hart perspective versus where you are with it now.
So, oh man, if you really want me to go down that rabbit hole.
I know.
I mean, I love talking about it. I built a place down here in Costa Rica in preparation for what's happening now 5 years ago. And when people say like, how did you know? Or like, what did you know? Just all the research. And like I said, you know, like you take all the research, you start to connect the dots. And some of the research just says like flat out basically what the agenda is. It's just it's never going to be in the media. They're not going to say like, hey, we're going to try to collapse the United States and make the one world government and whatever it is. So this might be totally far out for the people listening, but this is part of the agenda.
It might be where they're most comfortable, honestly.
Yeah.
What is the agenda? What are you talking about?
So, I mean, if you start to research, there is an agenda. There's multiple facets, and there's powers that are, you know, trying to basically override the other one. But the main agenda was Agenda 21, right? The UN's Agenda 21. Most people have heard about it. Other people haven't. If you haven't, research it. It's under the guise of something that's altruistic, right? They have terms like sustainable development, and they always use these words that you think like, oh, sustainable development, that sounds amazing, all right? And then you start to look at it, and it doesn't look so good underneath. So like when we talk, you know, we spoke recently about, you know, influencing people or maybe putting seeds in the mind to maybe control it a little bit. You do that with words, and you do that with marketing, and marketing is a word. So you use words, and this is how they do it. And so Agenda 21 is a one world government, right? And so, well, how do you have a one world government and the U.S. involved in it? Because the U.S. is its own country, and it has the only country that has what has been freedom, or was supposed to be freedom, run by the people. And slowly that's been eroding. And there's the whole, I don't know if you ever heard the boil the frog.
Yeah.
Right? So that's
slowly the frog doesn't realize it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So slowly you just take a little bit of freedom, create another act, a little bit of freedom, and then there's the problem, reaction, solution. So it's like, this is the Hegelian dialect. You create the problem, you get the reaction, and then you present the solution, right? It's like, so what's the end goal? Well, we want everyone vaccinated. So what do? Oh, we create a pandemic, or we create, or we want everybody restricted in flying, and we also want to create the TSA, which is a government agency which takes our taxpayers' money. And every time you go through the airport now, you have to go through a long line, and they're going to scan you, and it means really nothing, but, you know, it looks good. And so we're going to do that after 9/11. And it's like, well, that violates our rights. And you can argue it. People argue it all the time. But, you know, if you really followed our rights, that would be illegal. So every time there's a scare, all of a sudden, a little bit of our rights get taken away. And a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until before you know it, you're essentially enslaved. I would argue now that pretty much the U.S. is kind of not a free country at all, right? I mean, Bill Hicks was saying this in the 80s, I think. We said, you're free to do as we tell you to.
Okay, so let's back it up, because I love how your mind works, and I feel like that there's a lot of this that gets posted online by a lot of different people, but so little opportunity to actually dive deeper in.
Yeah.
So when you say at the beginning, it's a UN agenda, Agenda 21.
Right.
And it is basically calling for a one world government.
Right.
Who is calling for that, and why is that a goal, and why is that a bad thing?
Well, yeah, those are good questions. So, I would say it's a bad thing. I'll answer the first question. It's a bad thing if the U.S.'s Constitution gets destroyed. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, right? So, like, I believe that everybody is entitled to freedom, right? And their own type of freedom, as long as it's not hurting anybody else. And so, if it's a one world government, the U.S. no longer has its constitution. And the goal and the end goal is kind of to huddle everybody into these cities, and that the property rights are no longer yours, and that, like, the rest of the national parks, like, everybody's just huddled into a certain area, and they live in a city, and then they're controlled in that city. And that's the end goal from what I've based on my research. And so, to me, freedom sounds like, which is connected with my book, like being a part of nature. And I lived in New York City for 10 years. I grew up outside of New York City. I know what it's like to be in the city. I know what it does mentally, physically, and emotionally, especially to me. And maybe other people can deal with it and handle it. I didn't realize the matrix that I was trapped in. Like, I had no idea until I left the city, and it took me like 3 or 4 years to realize, like, what was going on with my head. Like, I thought, this is where it's at. And the truth is, it's part of my sickness. It was part of my sickness. It was part of how I became ill. It was like I was nonstop, driven, focused, push all day, every day, train, work out, work hard. Like, it was just nonstop. And that was my life. And then I got sick, and I decided, all right, I'm going to move out. And it took me like 3 years to really decompress. I mean, I moved to South Carolina, and you should have seen me, like, in South Carolina, driving behind people, like, gripping the wheel, like, get the fuck out of my way. Like, you know, like that type of, like, New York mentality. Like, I need to get there and get this thing done. And every once in a while you see on a bumper sticker, like, we're not going to do it your way, Northerner, or something, like, or go, you know, like,
yeah.
And I didn't realize that was a real thing down south. Like the Yankees was a real thing.
Yeah.
But I started to realize, yeah, there's a different mentality. And I started to decompress, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I was literally trapped in a certain mindset. And I started to think back, and like, that's one of the unhealthiest places you can be, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I started to reconnect with nature, and I started to realize the healing power of nature. And it wasn't until I really removed myself from the medical system, which I believe made me sick, that I really, truly understood the power of nature and healing naturally and using herbs and using the energy from the earth and qigong and all these different modes of healing that we've heard about from a long time. You know, like the East was doing this stuff 10,000 years ago, and we're now kind of listening to it, but there's a stranglehold because the medical system here is a business.
I love having these conversations because I get to have these moments where I'm like, whoa. And I just realized something when I was listening to you, that it actually does, because so much of what you talk about in your book, Healing Hacks, I obviously identify with and have moved closer to since moving to Costa Rica. And yet the level, the level of judgment that I have toward what I call hippies is enormous. And as you were telling your story's my story. I just didn't get noticeably sick, although I'm probably really sick in the head, but the New York for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking and saying, and I only started to say it once I got out of New York City, I started saying, it was the center of the universe for me. Yeah. Like there was no, like I would go to London to visit friends, or I'd go to San Francisco.
Yeah.
God forbid, I would go to nature for 1 or 2 days. I'd go to Maine for Christmas, which is where I'm from.
Right.
7 days turned into 5, turned into 4, turned in going Christmas Eve and leaving after the Christmas day.
Yep.
Over my college years. And then after that, I just stopped going to Maine and I started traveling elsewhere. And this, it was like an IV injecting in, and it was boom. And I just realized how much I've healed from the land, similar to you, like returning back into nature.
Yeah.
And yet how I still have this judgment against hippies. And I'm like, wow, that's really not doing anybody a service, because they're just trying to tell me, those hippies are just trying to tell me what we all have been needing to connect with.
Yeah, I mean,
it's weird that I just got that from what you said, but yeah, tell me what you were
I came from the military. Like I went through OCS through the Marine Corps. Like I didn't serve in the military, but I went through OCS in the Marine Corps.
Is that equivalent to a boot camp?
Yeah, it's a little bit more intense because it's like officer, like you have to qualify for it, and then it's more physically and kind of mentally demanding. So yeah, I went through that. I had an opportunity to decline my commission, and I think part of my illness started there, and that's part of in my book.
Yeah. So
I was like the least hippie you can be. I was like, I came out of OCS. Definitely with a certain mindset, and then I was like full steam ahead, like thought I was invincible, physically and mentally tough, and just pushing the limits, and pushed it to a point where it just snapped. And I literally had to rebuild myself up, and I've come out on the other side. So I'm kind of a little bit of a hippie, but I have like because I'm connected with nature, and I'm like, literally, I would tell people now to hug a tree, because I think I might have mentioned that in my book, because energy has a frequency, it has an energy, everything has a vibration, and the vibrations that were around a lot of times distort consciousness. There's nothing that helps realign consciousness better than nature. And so when you're really in tune, you can actually feel the energy and the vibration of the trees. And I've tested this out not only on myself, and I'm super sensitive now because of everything that I went through. Like I had to like literally assimilate all this stuff, like what's causing my illness, like literally tuning, like a tuning fork or a barometer for food, for everything that I was around. And then I also tested on my kids. As soon as they're upset, when they were babies, they'd be upset. I'd take them outside, walk through the woods, and all of a sudden they just, blood pressure goes down, and their eyes light up, and I bring them around the trees, and it's just totally different. And one thing you can test is on kids. I always test music. I test like nature. I always test these things on my little kids.
Yeah.
To see how they react. And it's amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know about this Agenda 21. A lot of it is removing people out of nature and putting them into cities. I'm just circling back to that because you also said, like, I knew I could kind of see what was coming. And that's why I got the treehouse in Costa Rica. What did you see and when did you see it?
So just assimilating all this information. Like the biggest thing that I did, I think that removed me from the matrix was I stopped watching TV. I just unplugged from the cable. And I started watching, reading tons of books. I started watching YouTube videos that just took me down this path, and I wanted to know more and more and more, and I just kept researching, and I kept asking for the truth. Like, what's the truth? Because once I woke up and I was like, wait,
what?
Is the reality that I believe like totally not actual reality? Like, is this just a facade? And I started to dig deeper and deeper and see, like, is what I'm finding out really true? And this was 10 years ago, and I had no one really to talk to about it then because some of the stuff I was finding out was kind of very dark and
tends to happen down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It gets dark.
It gets super dark.
It gets weird too.
Yeah,
like you find some real interesting people down there.
Yeah, and so I had to like back away from it because I was like, oh man, this is real weird. But it opened my brain. Like I was like, holy cow, this world is not what it seems. And so I started putting pieces together. I read certain books like None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, Behold the Pale White Horse, and then you listen to all these people that came out and actually warned about what's going on now. They were labeled crazy. And I started to understand what truth was and really like, is this guy crazy or is he what he's saying? And I would start to listen to what he was saying, and then I would start to connect all these dots, and I'd say like, okay, the guy that's labeled crazy is more in connection with the truth than anybody else that I've listened to.
But what about the real crazy people? I mean,
well,
there's peddling similar things. See, this is what's hard for me to distinguish in a world of like,
It is.
It's like, how does anybody, because the knowledge is so powerful and so important, the truth is so important.
Right.
And yet there are people peddling things that are unhinged.
Yeah.
And yet others that are saying things that aren't.
Right.
And honestly, like I just kind of turn it over and get into nature, and I don't deny it.
Yeah.
But I don't get into it.
Yeah.
Even though I'd really like to know what is truth. How have you moved toward a space of truth with everything?
I think over the years of just connecting the dots, and then really it comes down to my experience.
Can you talk about the dots? I think we're being kind of broad.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I won't label you as crazy.
So, I mean, like when you start to read certain books and watch the videos, like if you start to read, like, for example, I'll give you an example. Behold the Pale White Horse.
Okay.
This guy, Bill Cooper, first off, he's labeled crazy if you just do a quick Google search. But then you read his story and you start to see like what he was saying and then what's happening now. And you also start to see that a month before 9/11, he said, there's going to be an attack on the U.S. If they blame it on Osama bin Laden, you're the dumbest person ever. If you believe that, you're the dumbest person. And then he was killed before 9/11. So you start to like look back at all this stuff and connect the dots and start to see like, wait, the guy who's labeled crazy had said all this stuff, and then it turns out to kind of be true. And so what is the truth? And then you just start to see other people who've been saying the same things and connecting the dots. And, Bill Cooper was a retired naval intelligence officer, right? And you're telling me he's just a crazy lunatic? This guy was from a military family, was a naval intelligence officer, was super gung-ho, and now all of a sudden he just like lost his mind and went crazy. The same thing with Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson ran the whole East Coast of the FBI. He had a $20 million budget back in the 70s. And then we came out of the FBI, he started to investigate what was going on. right? He's one of the first people that blew the whistle on the chemtrails. He knew exactly where they were coming from, what airport they were coming from. He's on video talking about it, and everybody labeled him crazy. If you research all of his videos, if you don't know anything about it, you'll be like, this guy sounds crazy. But if you start to research and like find out, like, wait, this person's saying the same exact thing. This person actually experienced it, and they're saying the same thing. And then another person is saying the same thing. So you start to like just see all these people that aren't on the media and will never be put in the media are all saying similar things. And it's just too coincidental for it to not be true. And then the media is talking about something completely different that has nothing to do with the real problems. Right?
It's like a magic show. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look here while I do something here. Interesting. Yeah.
And those are just a few people that I mentioned off the top of my head.
Yeah, I love that you gave the book so that way people can go and like, if people are listening and they're like, what is this? They can actually go look at the books for themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say that the truth for you has come more from the experience combined with the knowledge? What has...
Exactly.
Because I honestly, I mean, I'm telling you earnestly, I don't know what to really align with anymore other than like nature myself. And I think a lot of people probably feel that even if they don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
Like, I know how to get into the present some days,
Right.
you know, some breathing. It was nice to breathe this morning. You know, obviously there are certain techniques.
Right.
And I mean, the Wim Hof style of breathing. But how have you done this for yourself? Like, how do you teach your children in this type of environment? I'm curious because you have 2 kids.
Yeah, I mean, teaching them in terms of like with the whole virus being here.
The virus, the ideas behind the virus.
So I want to say a couple things because you're asking like how first off, my parents thought I was totally insane.
Wow.
Like I told them 8 years ago that there's going to be a type of martial law. And I didn't tell many people that this is why I was building the treehouse. I was using it also for fitness and retreats. And then this is where I started kind of my healing journey with connection with nature. But I also knew the direction of what was going on. And it was an off-the-grid community. It was growing its own food. It was totally disconnected from everything. You could just hide in the woods. And it was a community of people. So it was like, hey, this is what I believe the future is going to be, which I still believe it will be. And that's... we're going to be combining, hopefully, the technology we have with nature. So anyways, my parents thought I was crazy. And now my dad's like, oh, my God, Ian's been saying this for years. And when you look at it, what are they doing with the virus? We couldn't go to the beach. It's one of the most sterile environments. It's where people should be told, hey, go to the beach. So you're starting to see this in reality and experience like what I planned for, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see it happen. It's like we're not allowed to go to the beach. I've seen, and then they said 5 to 8 a.m. I saw more people at the beach between 5 and 8 a.m. than I've ever seen in my entire life in Costa Rica. And you're trying to not spread the virus by sending it. It just reeks of a bigger agenda. And we know it's a bigger agenda because there was more death rates with the H1N1, and we didn't quarantine, we didn't wear masks, we didn't do any of that stuff.
The pig thing, or the swine. What's H1N1?
H1N1 was the flu in 2000.
That's the swine.
It's the swine.
It's the swine, yeah. That was 2009. So
I saw one of your posts. I mean, I haven't researched it, but I saw one of your posts. You're like, I think it was you. It was either you or Dr. Greg, who's actually on the Caribbean side, who was also here recently. Dr. Greg's on another level. Yeah. Dr. Greg D'Amato. Whoa. But it was either you or him that, I'll introduce you guys. Yeah. He's like this. He's a chef.
Yeah.
He grew up in Connecticut and kind of just, when his wife was born or pregnant with the first kid, he woke up and he was just like, all of this is, BS. And they were in Australia at the time, and he just started looking at all the ingredients. That's what started for him. And then it just literally unraveled.
Yep.
And he's an interesting character. He can just sort of, I'll introduce you to him. He's great. But it was either you or Greg that said, hey, we're about 56 million deaths off from the H1N1 back in 2009. Yep. Anyone know why we're all locked down in our house? Was that you?
Yeah, I think I posted a meme or something.
Can't help yourself, can you?
No, I can't.
56 million deaths off from H1N1.
Yeah.
And why are we all in our homes?
Yeah.
And again, I haven't done the research on it to know if that's an accurate number, but let's say it is.
And we also know that they're lying about the numbers. They've been caught.
Yeah.
So they inflated the numbers, the cases, they inflated the death. I mean, this is like on TV. They're actually saying it in front of us that if they die, no matter how they die, if they have COVID upon death, it's considered a COVID death.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, okay, well.
But people can't see that to me is something to be present. But people can't, it's almost like people can't take that piece and reconcile that within themselves. Because that to me is like such an important aspect of all this in terms of, but it's like if people believe that, then they need to like examine all their beliefs around this. And that just takes too much time for people, I think.
Exactly. So when this is the whole issue. When someone has confronted with something that destroys basically everything they believe in.
Everything.
It's too painful.
It's too painful.
And the ego's job is to protect us from pain.
Correct.
So they just say, well, I'll distract myself with this, or I'll attack them and tell them that they're an idiot.
Yeah.
And they don't know anything about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's usually the response you get is anger, because deep down inside, the people know what's going on. But the brain overrides it to protect the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I was down at the cafe in Dominical the other day here in Costa Rica and was talking to the business owner of the cafe and having a very friendly conversation. He has all of his people in masks. And we were just having a conversation around masks. And I was actually telling him I will never post about COVID or masks on Facebook again. Like I literally had hundreds of people just coming in left, right, and center saying, you never loved me or my family. I said, excuse me, I just suggested that maybe we have a reconciliation. I literally had someone
I know
who I've traveled with their family 10 years. You've never loved, I said, love you so-and-so, like after I had a nice interaction. And he's like, no, Jake, you don't love me and you don't love my family and you never have. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And these are dear friends.
Yeah.
So we're having this conversation and then a woman that I never met just enters stage right and starts ripping us about our simple conversation around masks. He's advocating for the masks. I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm having just a business conversation of how to run a Costa Rican company.
Right.
With the provisions. Very friendly, very cordial. Yeah. It's my friend. And then this woman just comes in and rips. And I said, I got to ask you a question. She's like, yes. And she's shaking. She's one of the shakers. So like her blood's boiling. So she's literally just ready to attack.
Yeah.
Ugh. And I asked her if I could ask her a question. I said, what in the world gave you an indication that you could come up and start talking to me and my friend about this? And the only answer that she kept asking is, well, I asked if I could say something. And I was just like, this is the world that we're in. It was like, and I was telling my friend about the Facebook conversation and the hundreds of people. And then literally she just enters in right there. So it was like art imitating life, imitating Facebook. It's
a weird time. And the funny thing is with those people, typically you can see like who's aligned with truth when in the end, because one will be saying something and then when there's nowhere else to go, usually someone just gets nasty and starts calling names and that person just doesn't have a leg to stand on. So the last thing they start doing is like throwing insults and attacking you personally. So I've seen a lot of that. Yeah.
And the thing with her too is, and I said to her, I just don't like the vibe that you're bringing. I said, I actually agree with you on a lot of what, because she was actually an anti-masker. I don't know if that's a thing yet, but she was actually advocating for what they're really doing, but it was just done with such vehement force.
Yeah.
And when I was simply exploring and holding the space for my friend to for him to have, it's just caused this, like, even if you agree with somebody, there's still like these match points, these infernos. Anyways.
Yeah. On the mask subject, just to bring something up, and this is something.
Oh boy.
I was going to talk about. In doing one of the classes or whatever. So the way the brain works is it unconsciously scans the environment for threat. And if something's threatened to it, alarm bells go off. It starts to like tune in to protect itself, right? There's unconscious threats to it. The number one unconscious threat is respiration, lack of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's not breathing correctly, right, if they're a mouth breather and they're not a nose breather, they're going to end up with some serious issues. If you put a mask over your face, it's going to dramatically affect you, and it's going to heighten the level of threat and fear automatically, just because of it's reducing the air. Then there's other psychological components to it, right? Emotionally, spiritually, inspiration means to breathe in, means to be inspired, means to be in spirit, and you're now affecting that whole process, right? It's like, imagine, would you put something over, people would freak out about this if you told them, put something over your muffler on your car. And they'd be like, no way, it's going to screw up my car. I've been doing fitness for 15 years. People treat their cars better than they do their bodies all the time. And because somebody said, because like a medical professional said maybe you should wear the mask, and this is something maybe we can get into because it's aligned with the book, that's where they're coming from.
Yeah, we can get into it.
It's
You're
like
talking about like the mind control?
The doctor told us to do it.
Yeah, it's an old way of thinking, but it's really ingrained in there. Like it's a real thing. Like people, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that starts from an early, that's early. I mean, these things are, the thing that I think people aren't realizing is that they've been on a path. I feel like this is happening around the world. Like people have been on a certain path, including myself. Although, I haven't felt the direct effects. I felt the direct effects, but I'm saying me personally. I'll give you an example. Like my aunt called me the other day, or when this all started, and she was off work for 2 months. She's a dentist or a hygienist in Maine. And she said, Jake, I just realized I've gone 55 years without looking at my purpose. How did you figure out your purpose? And part of me was like elated, but also really sad by that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow, 50. And I love her so much, and she's so dear to me.
Yeah.
And has just been there. And I can't imagine what that feels like for people who are just now like, oh.
Yeah, they're lost.
And it's because we've been on a path, and it's like that path has been dictated in some way, shape, or form. Can you speak to that? I mean, that seems
Absolutely.
like what you were. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just speaking about inspiration.
Yeah.
And most people don't live inspired. And I was fortunate to kind of come across this stuff at a young age. But you like part of what I do with the retreats is help people with that process. People just get on the treadmill and they don't get off, and they're just doing what they're told. I did the same thing. I did the same exact thing. It was like, go to business school, get a business degree, get a job, do this, do that. And one of the biggest things that woke me up from is I stopped drinking. Stop drinking alcohol.
You drank a lot when you were 15 to 21 in the book, right?
Yes.
Is that what those were your years?
Yeah.
Me too. I stopped when I was 21.
Oh,
yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Not many people do that. It
a lot
takes
of people.
A lot of courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was socially awkward. I used to go because I used to be in like the TV thing. So I'd go to these Hollywood parties when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, and just like downing the vodka Red Bulls just so I could get through conversations.
Yeah.
Just
I know the feeling. I was in the same
oblivion.
Type of industry.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that whole scene. It's crazy.
You stopped drinking. What did that cause for you?
The truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you can still stop drinking and be in denial.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is usually those people go crazy if you don't do the work to be centered with yourself, because a lot of people will stop drinking because drinking is a medication. It's a way to prevent yourself from feeling, and that's what I did. I numbed out, and I was good at numbing out. And I had someone tell me that, alcohol saved your ass because you probably would have died if you didn't use alcohol. So it got me through things. So it helped me out. And then I put the alcohol down, and I had all these emotions, and I had to address them because I had been basically drinking alcohol and just like forcing all this crap down into my body. And so I had to address them, and I did it through specific means of like, daily being present, being daily inventory. Was I getting angry that some of the stuff I put in my book? Was I angry? Was I fearful? Like, and repetitively doing it daily. Like, where could I have done better? Where was I selfish? Where was I self-seeking? Where was I dishonest? And then when you do that daily, it helps you be kind of impeccable with your word, your actions. And when I don't do that stuff, I start to fall off. And so it helped me wake up. It helped me be more honest. It helped me see and feel what truth is, like really hone in on that. So, so yeah, I mean.
What was life like for you? Because I know you stopped drinking around like 21, 22. And then I think that if I remember,
it was 22.
22.
Yep.
And you kind of got sick or got diagnosed, however you want to call it, at like 29. What was life like for you from 22 to 29? Like, what were those years like?
Actually, the first year I stopped drinking was miserable. It was like really kind of painful, even though it was like there was joy in it. Like I was feeling better and I started to feel. It was miserable. And I was trying to find myself. And through that time, I was traveling. I don't like to tell people this, but I was in the modeling industry.
Why don't you like to tell people
I
that?
don't know. I didn't like it. Yeah. And it just kind of fell into me. Like people said, you should be a model. And like the next thing I know, like someone sent in pictures and Wilhelmina called me back. And I was like, all right, I'm modeling. And I didn't really like the industry, so I left it. I decided to use my business degree. I went and started working for like a hedge fund accountant. I was an accountant at a hedge fund thing or whatever. It was like the total opposite. If I had done internal work, I would be doing what I did now. Like if I learned in school, like, hey, what are you really, really good at and what inspires you? I wouldn't have lost, the 5-7 years and ended up kind of in the direction I was going. But again, it all ends up in a good place. So basically, I went and did the hedge fund thing for like 8 months. And the whole time I was like training. And I was like thinking like, I can never sit at a desk job. Like it's just not me. So that's when I signed up for OCS for the Marine Corps. And this was after 9/11. I was in New York on 9/11. So I was totally bought into the whole thing. It was like, yeah, I'm going to go defend the country and blah, 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 blah. So I went to OCS. In my experience, I lined up for the vaccines there, and I was never really the same afterwards. So there was a lot of issues. You line up for like, I don't even know, 9, whatever it is, a bunch of vaccines. I decided while I was going through there that this probably is not for me.
You said you'd never been the same, like mentally, emotionally after you got the vaccines?
Yeah, it's tough to say exactly what happened. Because it was so long ago and it never hit me till years later. And I remember coming back and asking my parents, like, do you think I changed or do you think something happened? They were like, no, I think you're, the same. And then I started thinking and then I started researching on like some of the stuff in vaccines and what it can do. And I started to think like we lined up for a ton of them. You just literally line up and they just jab, 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 jab. And I remember being like really depressed, like really down, like felt like something like a neural pathway in my brain had been shut down or like, and so, yeah, so I literally was meditating every night. I was 3 years without drinking at that point, and I was like meditating every night, and I was just receiving like, this isn't your path. So I had an option, a 1-year option to take my commission from the Marine Corps or just be out. And so I opted out and I said, maybe I'll take it later on. In between that year is when I came back to New York and I was like, I could never go back to a seated job. Like I knew by that time I was meant for something physical. I got into personal training and that industry just like, for me, just took off. Like it like clicked and I was like, okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I was the busiest trainer within like 3 months of the whole company, which was Equinox, or I was third busiest or something like that. Like I was doing the most sessions within 3 months.
In New York?
In the nation.
Aha.
Yeah. And then
And you hadn't had any of the breathwork training or anything, right?
Well, I've been an athlete my whole life, and I was always told, like, you're very good at movement. Anything I did, any sport I did, I excelled tremendously. Like I did really, really well at. And so I was just naturally into physical. Like I understood the body. And it wasn't until I got into training did I realize that I naturally understood the body. And this was like where I was designed to be. And so that's when things took off. It was like I did really well personal training. Then I was asked to become the fitness manager because I was doing well. Then I was asked to be personal training manager. And then my buddy who was running the national department for Crunch, he asked me to come over to Crunch. And then I started doing that. And I was hiring, training, managing trainers, like sometimes 30, 40 at a time in certain locations. And I always knew that I wanted to open up my own place. And then I opened up my own place. But I got sick when I was like training super hard. I was working nonstop because training industry is pretty brutal. It's like 5 a.m. In New York, it's like 5 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night. It's not like that in most places, but it's like nonstop. So I was training really hard, working really hard. I had written a program in Men's Health magazine for the Urban Athlon, which is like a 8-mile race where you're like hopping over taxi cabs and running 50 flights upstairs and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So I wrote this program and my goal was to win the race. And I got sick like 2 weeks before. And basically my ego got involved and I was like, I don't care. I'm going to run the race anyways. I ran the race sick. And then that was the beginning of like the person I was. And I no longer was that person. And my life just slid downhill. And I still opened up a business while I was like operating at 10% of my capacity, thinking that was going to help me get better. I moved to South Carolina. I'm like, all right, well, I'll be in South Carolina. It's like warm and it just got worse.
So you got sick with what specifically? Can you tell people?
So when in hindsight, I was carb loading for the race and I was eating a ton of pasta and I most likely had a wheat allergy or a gluten issue. When you train a lot, you can get leaky gut. So I probably had an immune response and I started to have like this weird wheezing and breathing. And I was training in like buildings in New York City, which don't have great airflow. So I probably like was breathing in stuff. I don't really know what happened. Anyways, I ran the race, ended up with walking pneumonia. And then I went to a doctor who gave me fluoroquinolones, which is a type of antibiotic, and 2 steroids, an inhaler and an oral steroid, and it destroyed me. And it's in combination with a bunch of things. Like, I say those things like fluoroquinolones kill people, like literally kill people. They destroy their lives. Tens of thousands we're talking.
Why? What does it do? What does it do? It's an antibiotic.
It's an antibiotic. And an antibiotic, for those listening who don't know, it means against life. So it literally kills your life, which is why, probiotics. So anyways, it's a type of quinolones. It's like uses fluoride. I don't really understand the whole chemical structure of it, but the one I took is basically, which I found out, is chemotherapy. It's like a low dose of chemotherapy.
Wow.
Yeah. So it kills all the good and bad bacteria. It kills mitochondria. It can poison every single cell in the body, which is what happened to me. And I just spiraled downwards.
And they gave this to you for what symptoms were you having? The wheezing and
I guess crackling in my lungs.
The crackling in the lungs.
Yeah, and so
a low dose of chemo for the crackling in the lungs.
Yeah, and I came to find out that pneumonia can be healed relatively easily. Without any medication or intervention. Actually, it can be much easier and better. So, but they don't tell you this. And this is the thing that later on you get infuriated by, that you're actually brought down a path of more sickness. But now I'm empowered by it because I really, really learned. Like I almost died. I ended up in the hospital and I really learned to crawl out of the depths of hell, utilizing like every resource I had in terms of my intellect, research, knowledge, people I knew who were in holistic healing, because at that point I was done with the medical system when they told me I needed $1,800 a month medication. I was going to need it for the rest of my life and yada, 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 on and on.
Which was the diagnosis eventually led to a Crohn's disease diagnosis. Is that right?
They told me I had Crohn's when I was in the hospital. So my intestines like twisted.
Yeah.
And I ended up in the hospital. I can't remember if I'd gotten colonoscopy before or after that or whatever, but I was told, yeah, you have Crohn's disease.
And then they prescribed the $1,800 a month medication.
Yeah, when I was in the hospital and they told me you're going to need this for the rest of your life. And I was like, let me go home and research this. And I researched it and they don't even know how it works. Like that's when I started researching, it's like 50-50. Plus there's a rebound effect. If you try to come off of it, you can have a worse reaction. So it was like, and plus I'd already met some people who told me who are in the holistic realm.
Yeah, this is what I'm interested in because I wonder if you had already met people that were in their holistic realm. I wonder if your point of view was, oh, this doesn't sound great and I'd like some alternative options, or it was like, no, F this, Was it like, did you know what you didn't know at that point, or you just knew that something felt misaligned? Because I think a lot of people go through this.
That's a good question. I knew a lot about health.
Yeah.
I was in health and fitness. I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist, which is like, it's the only certification that gets put next to a PhD.
Yeah.
So it's like the only thing that carries that clout. So I had all that knowledge. So I thought I really understood what health was, but I really, really got to get a grasp of it through my experience. So I basically, I can't remember what your question was.
No, so I'm wondering, like, with the reaction to, was it, let me go home and study it so that I can make an informed opinion, or was like, no, this is wrong? So where were you coming in on it?
I'd already known, by that point, the medical system hadn't done much for me. Mm-hmm. And I'd started doing alternative methods. And I started researching on my own. I thought the medical system can't help me. I actually did a vitamin C detox, which I think caused the issue in my gut, not knowing that the type of vitamin C you use is very important.
Intravenously?
No, I didn't. If I knew it at the time, I would have. Like, that should be promoted, first line of defense almost.
Yeah.
I took like CVS, like GMO corn-based vitamin C, which I had leaky gut, and my gut was destroyed. So it just caused my gut to freak out.
I don't think people, I have heard about leaky gut for years, and I'm still not entirely clear. It is, all I can think of is like my stomach leaking. That's the visual I have without doing any research.
Think of it like an injury, like you got cut in the arm.
Uh-huh.
You just got cut.
The gut is the gut is cut.
Basically, the cut is injured.
Yeah. And is it actually leaking?
So it's a breakdown of the mucosa and the cilia, which is like these little tentacles that help absorb the food. And the food can actually bypass through the gut and go into your bloodstream. And this is what causes autoimmune reactions. The bloodstream, the body says, this is a foreign invader. And it looks like, so it attacks it. And maybe that piece of food might look like collagen in your body. So it starts to attack the collagen as well. And this is what you call arthritis, or, rheumatoid arthritis, right? So that's kind of what happens.
So would you say that based on what you've researched, that leaky gut is a leading cause of what people call autoimmune disorders?
Absolutely. The gut.
Like the top cause, the only cause, one of the, how do you rate it?
I mean, I would say it's, for anybody who's sick, the first place you got to start is the gut.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely first place. That's it. I mean, it's pretty much all disease begins in the gut. And so, yeah, that's where I would start.
You said earlier that when you train a lot, you have a lot of people who train hard have leaky gut. Is that because of the type of food that people who train a lot are eating that they think that they need, or what is that?
One of the things that causes leaky gut is stress.
Oh.
So people can just get leaky gut from over stress. When you train really hard, like athletic level training, like professional athletes and stuff like that, it can start to break down the gut, because essentially this is what happens. You have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. It's the drive. It's the things that, we take action on. The parasympathetic is where rest, digest, love, etc. happens. So, for example, if you're a runner, you're in flight. So all the blood is going to your extremities. and you need blood to go to your digestive system at some point. So if you're running and running and running and all the blood's always pumping to your legs and your arms and you're not getting blood into your digestive tract, then you go and you shove crap down your mouth and your body can't break it down, and it just putrefies in your gut, or it causes like the enzymes to work over hard, and you're utilizing all the enzymes to just like break down the food. That in itself can cause leaky gut. So so athletes have to be very careful. It's common for high-level athletes to come up with some type of illness or like just collapse from some type of illness because they push themselves too hard and they end up with leaky gut or in some type of reaction.
Without the proper knowledge of what actually is going on inside.
Right.
Yeah.
And getting the right nutrients, because like when you exercise, when you're stressed, you're depleting, and you're depleting magnesium. You're depleting magnesium is essential for the cells, and whenever you're stressed out, you're depleting magnesium right away. So it's utilizing all these nutrients, and if you're not replacing it, and the job of the gut is to break it down, assimilate it, and so really the chewing of the food. There's I think it was Paul Chek that said you should drink your food and chew your drink.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So as you masticate it to the point that it's like liquid, then it goes into your gut, and then you do it in a scenario where you're actually really relaxed, which is where breath work can come in to put you in the parasympathetic mode. Now, you dilate the blood vessels in your gut, you calm the nervous system down, and now you're, typically what we do is we have food and drink with our friends and family and loved ones, and that's when we calm down and relax, and then the food gets assimilated. It absorbs all the nutrients, right, all the vitamins and minerals, and then the body takes it on. If you don't do that, then the nutrients just passes through, and you're not breaking down and assimilating it. And then if you have leaky gut, it's not really assimilating it at all because that's damaged, so the cilia and the stuff isn't picking up the nutrients, and then some of the food might bypass into your bloodstream and cause the immune system to go on high alert, which is hypersympathetic drive, which means even when you think you're relaxed, you're not relaxed, which can lead to adrenal fatigue and over cortisol, like too much cortisol in the body. And if you're not, nourishing your body with more and more nutrients or healing the gut, you're on a path to disease and destruction.
It's interesting. It's so bizarre for me to be in like both worlds, like to still know people in the States and Europe and those who are not necessarily on the side of like nature, natural healing, understanding it, etc. And then being like in Costa Rica where all these incredible people with this knowledge come through, and I just feel like I'm in the middle, like I don't even know if I'm a bridge, but I just feel like I'm in the middle.
Right.
Because I see both sides, and it's just remarkable. Like I hear like the different conditions that you just discussed. So many people that I know struggle with it, and nobody's really cleaning up their gut. Like I even was looking at a picture on Facebook of my friends in Hawaii the other day, and it was some barbecue or something, and I zoomed in on the food, because I remember that life. I remember when I was eating like, salt and vinegar chips look so good. And I saw the burgers, and I'm like, all the other things, all the other packaged things, like the packaged sauces, the packaged this. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that was me. And I didn't think twice about it.
Yeah. I mean, I look back at that life a lot, and I envy it to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like
ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. I don't have an option. Like for me, because I know what's going on, but plus my body's changed because of what I've been through.
Yeah.
And I have to be very careful what I eat. And I eat very strictly because I learned to heal myself naturally, and I know what works for me.
What would you say a typical day of eating looks like? Because we can't figure it out at Imiloa. We've tried. We've had you here a couple times. What does a typical day look like that really?
So I typically eat ape. But like I said, I stressed my body out. I started to train harder again. I started to do breath work and ice bath and working and stuff like that. And I had a little relapse. I injured my gut. And I was eating seeds of fruit, a lot of fruit, and which is really hard to digest. And I was blending it up, but it still wasn't doing the job. So I typically I'm eating ape APE diet, which is the autoimmune disease diet. It's basically like a revved up paleo. So I'll eat certain fruits and vegetables and lean meats. Right now, I'm healing my gut. So I'm going through a gut healing phase, and basically I have like beef stock, or like a stock which is really highly mineralized, collagen stuff to help start healing the injury. And then I'll blend up fruits and vegetables, or I'll cook them very well so they're easily digested. I'll take digestive enzymes when I need it. I'll take vitamins and minerals that I need, probiotics, etc. And so I'll also cleanse. I'll take antimicrobials, like natural ones, because anti-inflammatories, because really it's inflammation.
I'm just curious, when you say that I pushed hard and I damaged my gut.
Yeah.
How do you know that you've damaged your gut? Like, what do you? How do you know that? Like,
these are good questions, because a lot of people are awkward talking about it, but I have to talk to it all the time. Yeah, because you basically have to look at your stool.
I see.
And there's like the is it the Meyer? No, I might be making that wrong. There's a stool test, like or a stool chart. I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head. I put it in my book. Anyways, you can look at your stool and you can look at what's going on with it. All right. So if you have thinner stool, you have inflammation in the gut. Something's going on in your gut. It's so if you have broken up stool, like it should look like round like a banana and be brown, and it should be like that consistently. If not, then your body's not breaking it down. So if it's watery, if it's like pebbles, then there's something going on. If you're constipated, if you're going too often, right, then there's an issue going on. So you can literally look at this chart. For anybody watching, they can go look at the chart and they can look at their gut health. And it's one of the first things that I recommend people do, because if, again, the issue starts in the gut. So disease starts in the gut.
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan of the stools. I did the liver cleanse last month on the new moon. That's what my hippie friends, who I love, told me to do, and so I did it. And it was interesting to see what came out of there.
Yeah, it was. Did you have the gut? Was it the liver gallbladder cleanse?
Yeah. Where I do the malic acid for 5 days, 6 days, and then I do the oil and orange juice on the final day, and then fast, and then up all night. And yeah, it's interesting. I like, actually we share an acupuncturist, or I think we do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You saw my dear friend
and
Kiara.
Thank you, by the way. Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah, I like to help a neighbor.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love is, because I really went through a lot when I first got to Costa Rica. I mean, I had sharpshooting pains running through my head. I had neck aches every other month. I mean, it was a lot to build this place in 8 months, which is what we did, and then start with, dozens of retreats right off the bat.
Yeah.
It manifested physically. There was stuff physically manifesting for me, hard stuff, like not debilitating, but really hard for me to get through. And I would basically just went to a chiro and an acupuncturist and went for what worked for my body, which I really believe that is, you got to do what's right for your body. I went mostly vegan, right? And it helped. And one of the things I asked her, I said, she spent years in Thailand and India and, with all these different people and Chinese medicine doctor. I said, how do you what is health? Like, in the middle of my struggle with the sharpshooting pains and the, what does it look like health? Like, what is a healthy, tell me something that please, because I want to move toward that. And she thought for a moment and she said, well, I believe that health is just listening to your body. Just listen to your body. And so I started to just listen to my body, and it's really powerful what it says back to you. I've been mystified by it, honestly. It's been the craziest adventure to be able to just listen to the body, and you teach people how to do that, and I just love that.
Yeah.
And then you can speak back to it, it seems like, through this work, like breath work and all these other things,
Yeah, I mean, interoceptors or interoception is like you began, like, right now, anybody listening, like, think of your left big toe and connect your mind with your left big toe, right? So really sit there and start to think about it. You'll start to feel a pulse. And most people never even do something like that. Like, we're always outside of ourselves all the time. Like, I've been there and I've done that, and I still do it. Like, that's what meditation for me is all about. It's like, I'm like out of my head, and then I'm like, all right, I got to go in the body, send energy, and you can send energy to wherever you need it by utilizing, it's a skill. Anything done through repetition is a skill. So anybody can learn how to do it. It's like we learn to be outside of ourselves. It's like we're taught to be outside of ourselves. And so the more we can be inside ourselves, be centered in ourselves, be inspired through our spirit, for me, that's health. Just like, there's many ways to say it, but it's a similar concept.
Beautiful. You talk a lot about different things in the book, Healing Hacks.
Right.
Different exercises, different personal stories, kind of bringing us forward. Like, obviously, you didn't go on the $1,800 a month medication.
Right.
And you kind of went into this deep dive of discovery and knowledge. And I know that, well, I guess I don't know, and I'd like to understand your relationship with back pain and back pain relief. Like, you're one of the experts on back pain relief. I wonder, did that come after you got sick, or have you always been, what has that journey been like?
So yeah, that all connects to everything that I was doing, because I played basketball my whole life. I played sports my whole life, but basketball was my main sport. I fell on my back twice, really hard. The second time I actually went to the hospital. They took x-rays. Actually, they took x-rays of my organs, but I went to a chiropractor later who took x-ray of my back, and I broke a piece of my back, the transverse process of the fifth lumbar. And so ever since then, I had pain in my back, and I just thought I was doomed for pain for the rest of my life. And this is a story that almost everybody has. It's like, one incident happened, I have back pain, and I'm going to have it the rest of my life, or they believe that's what they believe. And so every year, two or three times a year, I'd have it reoccur. And so when I got into fitness, I started to work on back pain relief. And then I hired a trainer, and he had an extensive knowledge and background, and we connected and started to create a program. And the program was Back Pain Relief for Life. And he was coming from the University of Belgrade, which is like it's like the prestigious place for exercise science. And he'd worked with 3 PhDs there, specific to these movements and this formula. And so we took some of the stuff that basically we combined our forces and then created Back Pain Relief for Life. And it's a natural program where you can move 8 specific movements done in a specific way, and it basically unlocks and decompresses the spine, gets more blood flow, nutrient, and oxygen to the area, which is what healing is. And then it's in combination with a few other things that we use. And basically, I use it on myself, and like I was in a point of pain, and boom, right away the pain was gone. I was like, okay, I've done everything. Like, I'm talking about, when I say everything, I've gone like from 15, I was going to chiropractors, physical therapy where they use the stim, acupuncture, acupressure, massage therapy, on and on and on. One of the best things that I did, I was 20, just to give you an idea of like what I was doing. At 24 years old, I was working in a bar in Queens and getting through college, or 23, whatever it was. And I was spending a minimum of 12 sessions for $125 a session, paying cash to go to this lady who did kinesis myofascial integration. And it was the best results I'd gotten for my back, but I still had to depend on somebody else to do it for me. And I had to pay a ton of money. And so, and I had to like go there, and it was like, I lived in Queens. This was on the Upper East Side in New York. And so, so I always had to depend on somebody else. The program I created was that the person could get themselves out of their own pain. And that's constantly my mission, is like putting the ball in other people's hands. Like, take it and run with it, learn, and you can learn from what I've done. If it works for you, if that's good, then you can take it and utilize it on your own. So the Back Pain Relief for Life program is something that people can do. We've had people do it on the plane. Like a guy actually sat down, like laid down, asked the flight attendant, can I lay down on the plane in the aisle and do the program? And then the flight attendant was like, yeah, what are you doing, by the way? And he gave him one of our DVDs. Later on, the flight attendant said, thank you so much for giving me that. It helped my back tremendously. And so that's kind of the word of mouth that it just spread, and it's been all over the world for the last 10 years.
Yeah, it seems to be a big part of where health is going. The direction where health and well-being is going is empowering people to be able to do it themselves rather than having to see someone else or see an expert. It's like, how can I actually just do it myself? That's really cool.
And not to take anything away from the other modalities that I just mentioned, because they can be helpful in combination.
Sure.
But like if someone's traveling or they're in a place where they can't get it, you can lay down. You don't need any equipment. All you need is the knowledge of the movements, and instantly it's going to start the healing process and usually start to eliminate the pain, depending on the issue. And that's another subject. So we usually, if I work with someone specifically, I talk to them and take them through an assessment first to understand like where they're coming from and can the program be a good fit for them.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were talking about today and like the podcast and then the masterclass and what that could be and would be, we talked about doing the back pain thing, and we put it out to our team of Costa Ricans, and we're like, does anybody suffer with back pain? We knew one person. We knew the gardener, but he's been doing better since we put him on CBD oil and got him off of his antibiotics. I think he was on, not antibiotics, but he would have been on some painkiller,
anti-inflammatory,
something, anti-something. So he's doing pretty well. But it was our provider, our food provider actually, who does all the farm to table stuff. She's the mother of our Chef Pedro. And she like raised her hand immediately in the chat. She speaks no English. It'll be interesting. She speaks some English, but India's going to translate. So
awesome.
The co-founder of Imiloa, she's great at translating.
Good.
So there's going to be a masterclass. We're going to create that together, because I was doing some research before our thing, and like something like 22 million Americans, U.S. citizens, suffer with some form of back pain. And a lot of them are under 40. I mean, it's an athletic thing. I remember luckily, even though as a bigger guy, I haven't had any pain actually, which I've been so grateful for, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And I practiced Ashtanga Yoga, and I remember when I first started practicing Ashtanga 2 years ago, I was 80 pounds heavier.
Wow.
And if you do Ashtanga, it's like, do you know what Ashtanga is? It's like warrior yoga.
I think I've done it before.
From Mysore. It's very intense. It's the discipline. I love the discipline.
Yeah.
And I started practicing it. I thought I was going to die the first few times. But I had an Israeli instructor who was in the army in Israel, Avi El-Kayem.
Yeah.
And he got out of that army, and they had him on so much medication in New York City back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
He himself was 400 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
He now is 150 pounds. He's in his 50s now, and he just knew how to take me through. He got certified in India with Patabi Joyce or whoever the guru was. And he just knew how to take me through and knew how to keep me coming back without, well, as a fitness instructor, you want to keep a certain level of motivation.
Push you a little bit outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah. And obviously I did something that wasn't right during the practice, in the early days of the practice, and I really screwed up my lower back.
Mm.
And the only advice he had, and I don't know if it was because, he's Israeli and everything is slowly, but the back was really messed up. And he said, slowly. I said, well, I was doing it slowly. He says, no, slowly you repair the back. And he said, just keep coming to class no matter what you do.
Mm.
And I did yoga with a hurt back.
Mm.
And I got to tell you, that's the first time that I didn't do anything else except for what I was doing.
Right.
Got better at the poses. But within 3 weeks, the back pain was gone.
Yep. Bed rest is one of the worst things you can do for back pain.
You got to keep it moving.
Yeah. Synovial fluid oils the joints, and it also brings nutrients, blood flow, and oxygen. And so compression is necessary for synovial fluid to be activated. And so movement is essential. And this is like where, like, the worst possible thing you can do is take pain medication and go lay down. It literally stops the flow of energy and thickens the blood. It messes your gut up. That's a perfect example. When people start taking painkillers, they get more constipated. So it slows everything down. It might stop the pain, but you're going to be in more pain later on, not necessarily in the back, but in other areas. And so it's important to keep moving.
Got to keep moving.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring us back to, and then we can probably wrap this little dog and pony show up, but you said it about at the beginning of the show, and I want to come back to it because someone else also had said this. We had a guy And I'll tell you who he was because he was on this show, Jayesh Punatar. He was a New Yorker, billionaire dude. He was here at Imiloa just hanging out, and then I started to interview him. We brought him in for an interview. So come down to my dome, and we interviewed him back when we were in the dome. And he's a tech guy. He's a tech guy and a finance guy and partners with all these well-known people and all this. And he said something that you also just said a little while ago, and he said, I think the future has to do with nature intersecting with technology. And he didn't say anything more on it, and I don't know if he had anything more on it, but I have a feeling you've been thinking about this for a little while.
Yes.
What is
the chills?
Give you the chills? You sure it's not the AC? I like it very cold in here. Yeah, and so the future is this intersection of nature and technology. When you said it, what did you mean? What's alive for you in that?
Well, so the community that I invested into, that I built the treehouse in, I just had this vision of what the future was going to be, and I still believe this is it. Is that it's going to be communities where they're self-sustaining, and I hope this is the future. Self-sustaining communities that are not like, they're low impact on the low footprint, right? Like not destroying things and utilizing things and throwing them away so they build up garbage somewhere. That we're utilizing nature around us, and it's getting utilized in a way that doesn't create destruction, but we're still able to utilize technology and speak to people and do business. And, I think about it, a treehouse community that's totally off the grid, right? But it still has Wi-Fi. When I say off the grid, I mean like it has Wi-Fi connected to it, but it's being run by like solar power. It's being run by, they were going to put a turbine in the river and get that going. So we're still able to connect. And you can connect in one area. When I go back to my treehouse, there is no connection. And I'm like immersed in pristine forest. And there's nothing there but yourself. And so you're really reflecting on self. You're not distracted by TVs. You can, potentially people could do all that if they wanted. To me, it kind of defeated the purpose of it. It's like, hey, I can go to this one area, the base camp, and I can watch what I need to watch. I can send the messages, and then I will hike back to my treehouse, and I'm there in the middle of the jungle, basically like high-end camping, super, super high-end camping, hot water, bathrooms, etc. And so I think for some people, for me, I would love to see a world like that, instead of like stacking people on top of each other. And maybe it's not possible. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that say you could fit everybody in Texas, in the world, can fit in the size of Texas if you had to. But I tend to feel there's enough space for that. And a community where people really feel free, like real freedom, and not restricted. And I mean, I just dream about a world like that, where it's like you're not regulated by everything. You're not taxed. Like everything you work for is just like gone, and you don't know where it went. And it's like you're reinvesting into communities. You're reinvesting into yourself, and people get to pick and choose the community maybe that they want to live in. And so that's what I believe is already happening now, but I believe it will become bigger. Like the community I'm part of now has been shut down. There was a legal thing going on there, and then with COVID, it just, so I'm kind of like, oh, well, I lost my investment there, but in the back of my head, I know still in the future, I believe, especially with what's going on now, like I've talked to real estate agents, and they say like people are calling like, when can I come to Costa Rica? Like as soon as the border opens, they're like running here, and they're buying a place, they're buying land, and they're making sure that they have fruit trees. And because it's a little bit scary now, like people realize like, hey, if I lived in Manhattan and the food supply started to dwindle, what happens next?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the supply chains are messed up. I mean, we own apartments in Michigan, And this isn't the food chain, but to me, it's the supply chain.
Right.
And we can't get stoves and fridges right now.
Really?
It's wild.
That's
in
so
Michigan. And it's a lot of different factors, I think. And we're not like in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. I mean, it's 100,000 people.
Yeah.
But it's just to hear that to me is the first sign of like, yeah, there's a cog in the wheel. It's
right.
like and it's so funny because I talk to people in cities and I'm like, before the border shut, I was inviting everybody down here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where I was going to put them all, but I was like, yo, if you want to get out, like my good friends,
right.
Yep. Nobody bit.
Mm.
And I
told my whole family, like, guys, why don't you come with me? No, I don't wanna. Some of them did want to go there, but it was like too late kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I did the same thing.
Yeah. Interesting. I love this idea of the treehouse community. I thought it was a different one. It's not a public one. Is it a public retreat center?
No, it's not a retreat center. It was designed originally for like people to move there and live there, but now it's more like basically like a hotel, I guess, but different tree houses, and they would manage. There was like a management system that people could book tree houses or whatever tree houses.
Interesting, because
it has famous tree houses.
It's not the one that Richard Branson was wanting to be involved with, is it?
So I did hear something about that. Yeah, he wanted to buy it.
Is that your place?
Finca Bella Vista.
Oh,
I recently heard that. I didn't even know. Like
I recently heard that too, and I didn't know that was your place.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh, that looks amazing.
Yeah, no, it's the energy there is amazing. When I went there,
I didn't know that was. I thought when Bart, our mutual friend, said like he has a tree house, or you told me you had I thought you built your own tree house and was just crazy down in the Osa, just like swinging from trees. I didn't realize that was you.
Well, Finca Bella Vista was owned by a couple.
Uh-huh.
And then they broke it down into lots.
Got it.
And then I bought a lot and built a tree house. So there's about 17 tree houses or something like that.
Cool.
There. And yeah, and the couple still owns it, but they're going through their own thing.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's Costa Rica, man. It's like the land of 13,000 fantasies.
Yeah.
Like I realize like everyone just has a fantasy that they're living out down here.
Really?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have you here, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. You feel complete?
Yeah. I feel good about it.
For now, for the first one.
Yeah.
There'll be more.
I'm excited. I love this conversation, and it's easy to talk to you. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
Cool.
I learned a lot. Awesome. Thanks for listening, everybody.